Hello everyone. I hope the sound is okay. If not, please write down in the chat during the webinar. Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining DemoPoint Academy sessions. My name is Yael Hacker, and together with me is Shai Levin. We are both from Checkpoint Solution Center, and we are responsible for DemoPoint platform. As you know, every several weeks we prepare different sessions for you on different blueprints, so that you will get some training about the different blueprints that we have to offer. The idea is that you will be able to learn how to use it, how to demonstrate it with your customers. And with DemoPoint Academy sessions, we want to increase your knowledge, to increase your confidence with Checkpoint technologies, and specifically with the different blueprints that we have to offer as part of DemoPoint. On today's session, we are planning to present to you CloudGuard on NSX environment. This session is, of course, it's going to be recorded. Later on, I will share everything in the mailing list. Everything will be also uploaded to the SK, so you can hear it again later on. We have Lior and Kfir from R&D, who will do the training and answer your question. But questions, please ask them at the end. We will have time for questions at the end of the session. Before we start, I want to quickly just show you where the demo is located. So you're all familiar with DemoPoint. Once you created a new environment and you wanted to choose the relevant blueprint that you want to activate. So under cloud security, you have different options, and there we're going to focus today on CloudGuard VMware NSX demo. So, Lior and Kfir, if you're ready, I'll do stop share and please take control. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone, and thank you, El, for this introduction. I hope everyone can hear us well. Okay, so my name is Lior. I'm with the CloudGuard R&D for the past few years now. Some of you may know me from various training workshops and so on that we're doing on private and public cloud solutions. And together with me is Kfir. Kfir is one of the R&D team leaders and focal points for everything that's related to private cloud and SDN integrations, where he's also the focal point of everything we're doing together with VMware, whether it's just working with our VE solutions on top of ES6 managed by vCenters, or our more elaborate integration with VMware network and security extensions, NSX, basically also working on the future of that, transforming from NSX-V to NSX-T. We may spend a few minutes on that as well, just talking a bit about the roadmap that we have ahead of us. I know this is something that comes up quite a lot. As Viel mentioned, for this specific webinar, we are going to focus mostly on the demonstration of feature set, capabilities, and most importantly, value for our customers as you encourage them to deploy our CloudGuard solution on top of their VMware NSX deployment. In case someone has a very urgent question, okay, we will have time for questions at the end, but in case someone cannot contain himself, you can write it down in the chat, and we'll do our best to address some of the questions. Let's just check that we don't have audio issues. Okay, great. So, as always, for every DemoPoint blueprint, we also create, together with Yael, Shai, and the team, we also create a cookbook for you. In this specific case, you can, we will actually refer to the cookbook, which is a set of instructions throughout this demo, and we'll try to follow the normal flow of things, which again simulate in the way we see it the kind of things that are more interesting to customers and so on. So during this demonstration, we're mainly going to talk about how to actually allow for what we call threat prevention microsegmentation within a VMware NSX deployment, where we're going to demonstrate and discuss with our customers concepts like scaling and auto-scaling, redirection of traffic, maintenance of those very special type of gateways. Those obviously are not appliances or even virtual appliances. We're talking about service virtual machines, SVMs, that are going to provide this security service. We're going to talk about the automation aspect of these solutions, how provisioning is done, how automated maintenance actions are performed, and so on. And we're also going to demonstrate the tight integration we have also with the control plane using the what we call the CloudGuard controller, and using some additional advanced security features such as the threat prevention tagging and other capabilities that are actually quite unique to our solution. One thing that we've made sure to include, even within the cookbook itself, we've highlighted, just in case we're not right there with you as you demonstrate the solution and you only have this guide. This guide is very detailed, and it also includes all the important selling points. Just in case we're demonstrating something that is a real differentiator, it will really be highlighted within the document. So the way this environment looks like, basically it contains a set of E6 servers. In this specific environment, you'll be able to see that that we only have one server. However, in many POC environments and so on, it's possible that you'll see multiple, and that will be very common where you want to demonstrate aspects like vMotion, for example, or what we call the green-blue upgrades that I will talk about later on, and so on. For this specific demo where we want to demonstrate our security capabilities, one E6 server is definitely enough. In this server, we have two machines simulating web servers and database server respectively, and the service VM that is a CloudGuard for NSX solution. It used to be called VSEC for NSX solution up until recently, so everyone is familiar with that name. Both goes, like even if even all the commands have aliases and so on, some customers refer to it this way and others refer to it in the newer name. And also we have in this environment a vCenter that manages all these ES6 servers, and we have a checkpoint management server that will provide two very important roles. One will be to manage the security virtual machines, and the other will be to also serve as the service manager for the VMware NSX. This is actually quite important for everything that has to do with deployment of the solution and so on. Okay. One very important tip before we begin, a bit about the logistics of these environments. Since this is an sort of emulated environment, virtualized environment that is running a virtualized environment, there could be cases of time differences, and like the best way to see that will be in case you start a demo and you find that you're not receiving logs, for example, into the log server or anything of this sort, and then there is a clear explanation on what you probably want to do, and a very simple NTP configuration could get the timing sorted, and then you'll see the logs properly. Okay, so let's start after we've reviewed all the possible components. Let's start with this environment. Now, this environment is already deployed, and when we're saying it's already deployed, and by the way, for everyone who really wants to be NSX savvy and get more into virtualization, you have a separate blueprint that allows you to experience the actual deployment. It's actually a very cool process of how you deploy service VM, checkpoint service VM within a VMware Fabric. Since this lab is designed for anything between 10-minute talk to 30-minute talk with our customers, we already deployed the solution, and this lab is more for demonstrating an already deployed solution. If you do want to start with the actual deployment, you can see right here, Xperi is demonstrating that the service VM is actually deployed within the VMware Fabric. In this case, the VMware Fabric is basically one cluster of one E6 server. Obviously, in real world, this will be a bunch of E6 servers sorted in several different clusters, serving different purposes, different business units, and so on. So once, and again, everyone who wants to experience the deployment is more than welcome to do so after this webinar. After the deployment is completed, another part that happens is basically the automatic provisioning. The service VM is being added automatically to the management server. It's being registered within the checkpoint management, as well as within the NSX manager. From that point onward, we have a service VM that can be managed by checkpoint management. It automatically receives the relevant policy package that was assigned to this sort of cluster. Okay, we're using a kind of logical third-party cluster just to include all the service VMs that belong to the same ESX cluster. Okay, and now we can actually start demonstrating. So the first thing that we will go over is actually a very important differentiator that we have, and that is the CloudGuard controller. Now, for many customers, CloudGuard controller is really the entry point to everything that is cloud, SDN, public cloud, and so on. And it's basically an integration that we've created. It's a relatively new option that you'll see to add data centers on the checkpoint management. Okay. So you'll see that you can add a new type of server, and today this, if you look at the very latest version, the list is actually much longer than this one. But here you'll find a list of different data sources. Basically, the concept of controller is very similar to what we're doing with identity awareness for users, only in the case of controller, we're doing it for servers. So the idea is to integrate the checkpoint management with VMware vCenter, VMware NSX, maybe that same customer has an AWS environment as well and wants to configure this very kind of multi-cloud scenario where you have a front-end web server running on AWS with a backend that's running an AWS service, and the backend of that is an on-premise database that's running inside an NSX environment on top of a cluster protected by the SVM. And that same customer may want to describe this entire flow with just one rule. So the first thing that we like to do is to demonstrate basically how easy it is to create the integration, add and remove imported objects. So basically, it's very simple. Once the integration is there, and it takes about 2 minutes to achieve, and that is including the creation of accounts in NSX and vCenter to the checkpoint management. Basically, what you want to be doing is to use a new option to import objects, and you can import from vCenter. This is actually quite unique to Checkpoint. This is definitely something that only we do, and many customers are actually really appreciate this capability. So you could import elements directly from vCenter, and actually what you'll see here is the actual tree of hosts and cluster within VMware. Okay, so even if you put like side by side the VMware vCenter, and you put it side by side to that to what we just saw, you can see that it's the exact same structure as the hosts and clusters. This is very important also, so customers are very familiar with that. But it's even more important whenever you want to have automation within your environment. So, for example, you want to create, you want to use vRealize, VMware Automation Suite, or you want to use Ansible or Chef or Puppet. You can basically use the same path that you use for the VMware side of automation and just change a small portion of that, and all the scripts remain the same, and now you're actually communicating with the checkpoint management as well. So everything that we're showing here is also accessible via API. So as Kfir is now showing us, it's very easy to import. Directly from VMware vCenter or from VMware NSX to import entities. And this is actually something that in many cases it's important to sort of explain to the customer what happens now when we're doing this action. And technically, when you import a specific object, several things will happen. The first, once an object is imported, it's actually not statically written within the checkpoint database, but rather we create a sort of, you can think of it as a sort of a link. We've created this link to a logical group that's called a web group that exists on VMware NSX. In VMware NSX, it is configured as a security group. Basically, NSX security group, I haven't said it before, but NSX security group is a sort of logical grouping mechanism that allows you to group together different types of entities under the same logical configuration. So it's actually enforced using the plans and a lot of behind-the-scenes mechanisms that are not really important, but are very sophisticated and interesting. If you do the deployment lab, we explain more about that. So going back to what we have here in the finished environment, the idea is that you can import directly from vCenter, as I said before, and you could import virtual machines and so on, or you could import from NSX. And when you're importing from NSX, basically what you're doing is importing security groups. Now in NSX, security groups are defined within the NSX Service Composer component. In many cases, when you demonstrate it to a customer who is interested in this technology, there are good chances that they already have, like someone already did the effort of grouping together machines, tagging them, documenting what's being done, creating the sort of network policy that allows certain groups to communicate with other groups and so on. Okay, so this is what we're seeing here. We're seeing logical groups of virtual machines that are constantly being enforced. Now, VMware supports this allocation in a way that is static. I can either say this, and this machine belong to the same logical group, or I can allocate it dynamically. In many cases, customers would say every machine that is tagged in this way, or every machine that is using this specific naming convention, like all the machines that belongs to a certain business unit and so on. Now, the coolest thing about the controller integration is the fact that we don't need to use these complex logics. It was done in VMware side, and from that point, we can start consuming these very complex objects. So for anyone who's guessed it, we not only resolve the IPs and metadata of every virtual machine that is captured by this either dynamic or static logical group, but whenever there are changes, okay, whenever there are changes to that specific group, we also, and you know, a change could be a change to the name of the group, or more commonly, a change to the virtual machines that exist within this group. Another machine was added, there was a scale-up event, there was a scale-out event. We really need to be very careful about this distinction, okay? Let's say a machine was added into a group, a machine was removed from a group, and so on. Every one of these changes will actually be reflected, and we'll see several examples of that during the demo, that every change that we do to the machines that exist in the group, the name of the group, like the change that Kfir did here, okay, basically changing the logical name of the group, we still have a unique identifier that ties it in, and then this change is propagated into the policy. And now we're getting to the coolest part of controller. Every change that will happen to the virtual machines that belong to a certain group will actually be propagated to every checkpoint gateway that enforces this policy, that is running these rules. Now this is super important, guys. Okay, so I will even repeat it. As I said before, everyone who wants to dig in a bit deeper to see how this new infrastructure is working will be able to see very fast that we're using a relatively new API that Checkpoint created that's called the Identity Awareness API. Now, Identity Awareness API is not just used for users, it's used for every change that you want to create and propagate across gateways, but you do not want to install policy. So basically, we're not making changes that are what we consider change management. We're not adding new rules, removing rules, and so on, but rather we're making dynamic changes without push policy on the fly to the context of existing objects. So just to give a practical example that many customers can relate to, let's look at our policy. And let's assume that this is something really that every customer can relate to. So when Kfir, for example, is hovering over the web group, let's say you created a rule that allows any resource you want to publish your web group, and you allow anyone basically to connect to your group of web servers that provides this service. Could be Nginx servers, could be just some regular web service, and so on. And now let's say you had a scale out event. You had more connections. You need to add another web server. In many cases, you would ask a customer, okay, so what would you do now? And the customer would tell you, I would probably have to, if I'm using a static object, I would probably have to go to my checkpoint policy and add another object, add it to the network group that I had there, and then install policy. And this is very time consuming, and it's very risky in some cases. You don't want to do that. And what most customers want to do basically is to say, I'm going to put this sort of link in here for the web group, and then whenever I have a connection that's coming to this web group, I don't care how many IPs, how many VMs exist behind this group, they're going to have access to that. And when those VMs are removed from that group, they will also automatically be excluded from the policy and do quite a lot of housekeeping that always leaves a lot of mess in people's policies. So the idea is to work with very organized kind of template that we have. So now let's start looking at the value that we have in our And container, one last sentence on that. This controller capability that we've talked about, this type of integration, is actually relevant not just for CloudGuard gateways. Okay, you don't have to be deployed in a VMware fabric in order to get VMware metadata. And this one is unique to Checkpoint. So you could actually enrich the knowledge of your perimeter gateways with insights that are coming from the NSX fabric without ever like being connected to the what we call the southbound of that, or the data plane of that. It's enough that everything is managed by the central Checkpoint management architecture. Okay, so now let's focus on the service VMs themselves and on the actual solution of Checkpoint for CloudGuard on the NSX fabric. And those will be our service VMs. In many cases, customers that already implemented the NSX model are really into microsegmentation. And for a very good reason, right? It's a very interesting concept where you could have a completely flat subnet for all of your data center with many clusters and so on. And still you can do segmentation. And you can do segmentation in NIC level in a logical way based on the security groups that we were talking about before. So now it doesn't matter if my VM is connected to a certain port group or DV port group or universal DV port group, I should now say. I'll address that later. But it's much more important which logical group or which security group it's connected to. So let's look at our rule base very quickly, the one that we've created. And we've already established a rule that says anyone has access to the web group, but no one should have access to the DB group. Now, if you run, and in many cases I kind of like to do that, and to demonstrate to customers who are used to the fact that when you want to do segmentation with Checkpoint, you have to put your gateway as a sort of a router in between all the subnets. And if you want to do inspection, you need to be the default gateway. And then we like to show them that it's no longer the case. So you have your web server, and as Kfir showed us, it's running in network 10.0. 10.0. Something something, basically class B, completely flat network. And now we want to communicate, and you have all the scripts ready on every machine already. So we run a connectivity test on this web group connecting to the DB group. And you can see that I'm 10.0.0.101 connecting to 10.0.0.201. No doubt, I'm in the same subnet, right? So only if I'm using the NSX model with the service, with the actual service VM from Checkpoint, I'm able to do what you can now demonstrate to your customer. And this is what we call the microsegmentation threat prevention. So we take our service VM and we deploy it in an integrated way with the VMware filters. Basically, they are called DFW or distributed virtual filters, and they provide us. They basically redirect all the traffic that was designated by the customer to our security service. Now, one of the advantages in this model is the fact that the customer, once they deploy the Checkpoint service VM, they don't have to start inspecting everything. We've had many cases like when a customer deployed this solution on a fabric, and for the first time he had production traffic that is seeing a Checkpoint IPS. And there were all kind of in-house applications that are really not standard, and you could assume that this could create a lot of mess. And many customers want to do this in a very gradual way. So the idea is that the customer can control what is being redirected to the Checkpoint service. For the purpose of this demo, we're redirecting everything. Okay? So what happened is, regardless of IP, the DSW, based on the redirection policy, realized that these packets coming from the web security group to the DB security group needs to be redirected to the checkpoint service. Now, the funny thing is, if you actually look at the log, you'll see that the inspection is happening in microsegmentation, right, in a flat network, and you'll see that the interface that is doing the inspection is ETH2. Now, ETH2 is actually not even an IP interface. If you look at our gateway, and it's probably not part of the demo, but like for everyone who wants to dig a bit deeper, if you look at ETH2, you'll see that it's not an IP interface, and it's actually not even not configured with any kind of IP because it's connected. It's a sort of dummy interface, a pseudo interface that we connect into the VMware API, an API that's called Netix API and allows us access to the data plane. And again, you can use this. You can use all kinds of scripts to demonstrate how we do that with HTTPS inspection, how we do that with application control, and it's actually very important for customers to see that they have this capability, but they have it with all the services that Checkpoint supports, that they know and like from PlaneTrade. So even if I do like an SQL query, something will be able to tell me that, yeah, I actually saw an SQL connection and the application control is working, and this could have been also, and you're more than welcome to try like HTTPS connections and show how it works with HTTPS inspection and so on. So it's all within the possibilities. And again, the important thing is, since we imported the object, you can see the source under source machine name and destination machine name. You can see the logical names of those security groups. Okay. So so basically, even in the logs, you have visibility to the actual identity and not just to IPs. Now, in many cases, it's crucial for customers because they have all these requirements for regulation and so on, and they want to look at the logs and get more value out of them, and not necessarily be tied to IPs, which are very hard to try and understand what happened to them actually. Okay, so for the next thing that we want to demonstrate to our customers is the dynamic changes or dynamic enforcement that we have for these objects. So we've already established that we have a web server connected to our environment, and we are able to sort of track every change that happens on this web server, right? Now, in many cases, machines will, as I said, auto-scale, or machines will even change their IPs. So let's see what happens when we change this specific IP for that machine. Now, obviously, this session that we have here is disconnected, right? Because it's connected to the web server. So you actually have, Shai has been kind enough to create us a setup that includes all the machines. So we're connecting to that same machine after its IP was changed. Okay, and we can even prove to our customers that, yeah, I changed the IP. And again, these kind of changes can happen all the time in an SDN fabric and in NSX fabric. There are actually solutions that force the admins to kind of update their policy every now and then. And obviously, this is not something that we want to do. We want to have everything nice and dynamic. So now that we've simulated, this state of IP change, it's time to see what happened to our entity. Now, even before we run connectivity and so on, what you can do is again hover on top of one of those objects that are imported, and you can see that the IP was actually changed. Now, again, it was changed in the management. It will now change in the logs. It will change in the enforcement. It will change in the gateway. And, you know, like you've been following the demo and you saw that like we haven't installed policy. We haven't done anything. We just changed the context of the rules. Now, to actually demonstrate it to the customer, this is the important part for them. You can run that same connectivity test that would fail from any other source, but works from the web. And then you can go to the logs and show them, hey, this log and this log are actually from the exact same machine, only it changed its IP. But still, I was able to track it. I was able to address it with the same rule and to produce a log that represents what we wanted to see. Also, for auditing purposes, we've added the logs for these kind of changes. On this version, they would look like kind of identity awareness logs. In other versions, in the more recent versions, they are wrapped a bit more nicely, so customers may actually see a sort of audit trail of what happened to their machine. I know in many cases this is kind of a repeating requirement. Okay, so we saw the changes on the logs, the changes on the policy, and now let's move to something a bit different. Okay. Just 1 second. I want to make sure that I'm completely aligned with the cookbook. I will also say that there are different variants of the demonstration that we've just done, and like you can look at the cookbook and you have 2 different variants there where you can basically try both of them, and in many cases, like customers react very well to this kind of dynamic enforcement that was actually missing in Checkpoint for quite a lot of years. So now let's move to another important aspect of the dynamic enforcement, which is basically the ability to share, and which is basically the ability to share security insights with the overall environment. Okay, now up until this point, you've demonstrated to your customers a sort of one-way integration with VMware, right? I consume objects, logical groups, I receive connections, and so on. But then, when you think about it, Checkpoint has a lot of security insights on the environment, right? We know we have HTTPS inspection, and IPS, and anti-bot, and antivirus, and threat emulation. We know if something is wrong. And in many cases, customers want to see this knowledge being propagated to all the environment. So let's try to demonstrate it. We have in the policy. Guys, we'll have time for questions. I promise you, we'll go over all the questions and we'll make sure that everything is answered. So let's take a look at our policy. And in the policy, you can see that I have a rule that says infected machines should be basically isolated, source and destination. Just make sure that no one is like connecting to you. Okay. So we have an empty group here, and in many cases, customers are really excited about the option to have the kind of proactive security, in the sense that I can plan for quarantine, I can plan for any kind of reaction that I want to security events, but I don't have to do it when those events happen. I can do it up front, and then I can deal with them in an automated manner. So we have this empty group that says infected VMs, and right now it's empty. Okay, we can even look at the group in Service Composer and see that it's empty, or we can look at one of the servers that we have, and we can see that it's not related to it, and so on. So for this demonstration, we'll be looking at the web server in the VMware side, and we'll be looking at our checkpoint management on our side. Now, this web server we saw before has connectivity to the database, and everyone's happy, and it's all nice. Now, let's assume that this web server is now becoming infected with cryptocurrency mining bot, or with ransomware bot, or with whatever, something malicious. So, like the first reaction would be for I don't know if we have someone from Netherlands here, but yeah. So the first reaction of the gateway will be to eliminate every attempt of that infected machine to connect to its CNC, or to propagate itself, or to create any damages, basically. But this is regular anti-bot behavior. Now we're looking at, now we want to see like the next level of what we can do with this kind of knowledge. Now the idea is that it's not enough for Checkpoint to know this information and keep it to ourselves, basically. It's extremely powerful if we can somehow update NSX Manager, okay, and I'm going to refresh it now, and take a look at the security tags. Because I had a botnet event, I got my bot found tag. And then this machine was added to a dynamic group that's called infected VM. Now, once it was added there, it was also added to the checkpoint policy, and this is pretty much where we close this circle. And from that point, the machine no longer has connectivity basically to anywhere in the environment. Okay, so you could run the same connectivity test that was working before. But now, obviously, no one's answering. And when I look at the log, I can see that, yeah, sure, it was that machine from the web group, but it's also part of the infected VM group. Now, the response doesn't have to be quarantined. In many cases, when I demonstrated it to very tech-savvy customers, the immediate thing they would say is, first of all, it's very cool, but it very much depends on where I place these rules and so on, right? Because, like, what if a quarantine rule comes after connectivity rules and so on? Now, the truth is, most customers don't use this feature like that. Okay, this is something very nice we did for the demo, but the fact is, for most customers, they actually appreciate the fact that we don't quarantine automatically like some other vendors do. What we do is to share the notification. So for many customers, they want to see this tag being placed of suspicious machine or whatever, and they want to handle it in their own way, not necessarily in the policy. Okay, so this is the third part of the demonstration, what we call the threat prevention with NSX auto tagging. Okay, we caught the event, we relayed the event into NSX, and this is how we were able to contain this situation. Okay, so we saw this propagation of data. We saw the integration. I've also told you about, like, for everyone who wants to prepare for a full-scale POC and so on, is more than welcome to do that in the deployment lab. Okay, so now I see that there is quite a lot of activity on the chat. I'm sure that there is a bunch of interesting stuff there. So So we'll get to that in a minute, but let's start with the questions. Okay, so let's start with that. So a question was, can we have multiple data center objects of the same type? For example, multiple NSX servers, multiple Azure objects based on subscription. So first of all, we could have, you could create, and one of the requests like that we got is to, for a feature that we don't have yet, but we're going to have very, very soon in our upcoming release, to have a group of imported objects. So technically, you'll be able to create something like a network group, but it's not a static network group. It's imported objects kind of group, where you import into that group whatever it is that you want to have. In the midterm roadmap, we also have a very interesting way, or we will have a very interesting way to sort of filter and add conditions to these logical groups.
The question was if you can have multiple data center objects, and the answer is yes.
So again, as Shai is correct, like for this specific question, yeah, I could have a ton of NSX servers, a bunch of different Azure subscriptions, and basically this scenario is actually, it makes a lot of sense, right? Like if you think about a multi-tenant NSX or Azure environment, it's something that you need to have. So yeah, we support it. Another question that I don't think was asked, but I know that you will be asked when you present it to everyone, to our customers in the field, is how does this mechanism work with what is called NSX multi-site that is becoming very, very common. So again, we do support, we support and we've certified NSX multi-site recently, and we also are planning to support in the just in the upcoming release of the controller. We're going to add support for universal objects. So whenever you want to import those universal security groups and so on, now you can actually do that. Universal security group? Not yet. So it's just around the corner, and we are also already in EA stage if you want to take part in that. So for the next question. Next question is, what would happen if you lose connectivity to all NSX controller on or ESX? What would happen to the rule base and so on? So this is a very important question. Controller created a dependency for the first time probably in Checkpoint between the management and the gateways. Dependency that we're working out all kinds of ways to remove. But we did add a lot of safety mechanisms, safety measures for this situation. So for example, when a gateway is being disconnected from the management, or the management is being disconnected from its identity source, what would happen is something we call a recovery mode. Basically, the gateway will maintain its last good known configurations and mapping, and it will not be able to update obviously any changes because it's not connected, but it will maintain its last good known configuration until it can regain connectivity. Okay. Another question. Can you amend the web group on Smart Dashboard? Oh, okay. So the question basically is, you showed us how you do changes on NSX and they propagate on Checkpoint. Can you do it the other way around? Can you change something that was imported and then it will reflect on NSX? And the answer to that is not yet. The answer to that is not yet. We are looking into this option. The truth is, many customers first kind of suggest it, but then when you think about practical uses, they actually prefer, just because the way their organization is built, to stay away from such a solution where the Checkpoint side could potentially impact on the NSX database. So for now, the answer is no. can we get access to this demo to have play with? Sorry, I got on this late. So yes, you can. This is why we're having this session. You do have access to this demo and many other cool demos on the Cloud DemoPoint. This demo specifically is CloudGuard for NSX. And the question was, is it open for partners and for SEs? So yeah, it's for SEs, for partners, and
basically partners doesn't have access. They need to request from the SE access, and he will send the request to us.
Okay, so if you have a partner that wants to have access to this for training, for demoing, and so on, just let Shai Levin know, and he will get you sorted, basically. So, what about the previous log files? Will they show the old IP address or the new one? Okay, so once a log, basically the way logging in Checkpoint works, there are very few mechanisms that are allowed to make changes to a log after it was written, and this is actually not one of them. The requirement for customers is to have, at least when we define the project, to have the log created as with the metadata that it held during the time of creation. Okay, so it could be actually very important security-wise to have the real IPs that was present during that time, and to have just the logical representator changing. So the answer to that is no. Okay, the next one is the cookbook available for download? And the answer to that is yeah. Basically, when you spin up the blueprint, you have on the front page, Shai will show us that, you actually have the cookbook. You can download it, and you have access to this very interesting PDF that has all the information, everything I talked to you about. I don't know anything. I just read it 10 minutes before I started this meeting, and this is how I learned all the things. Okay, so you have access to that as well. You also have it in, Shai is showing us in SK. Okay, so you do have it on SK. You do have it when you open the blueprint, and they are pretty good. Yeah. Okay, so let's move to the next question. Okay, the next question is, what about throughput? All traffic is being redirected to the NSX service. Okay, great question. So I'm saying it's a great question because it allows you to talk about another differentiator that we have with VMware. First of all, we are actually the only vendor to support something that is called multi-channel, which is a new feature from VMware NSX, and it allows you to have multiple connections to that NetX API interface that I mentioned before, basically allowing us to get to a really impressive throughput. These performance results are actually were published very recently, and they were published, right? Yeah, so they are published on the public site also, and you can see our performance is actually it's about half of the virtual line rate that you would get, which is basically more than enough for most customers. In case a customer still has a problem, even though we have multi-channel, even though we have multi-core solution and so on, and it works very well, and it needs more than, I don't know, more than 5 gig NGTP per service per ESX, which doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Just imagine if this guy has 100 ESX, so what, like the outbound for the data center is several teras. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But let's suppose someone does have, they can always register more than one service. Okay, so we do support multiple services on the same ESX, and it's even bundled within the same license. So performance is basically never never a problem. Someone was asking, I kind of missed the opening part. I kind of missed the opening part. Is the controller capability relevant only for CloudGuard Gateway? So again, no, the feature is available for every checkpoint gateway. What's not available is the microsegmentation threat prevention, for which you will need the CloudGuard for NSX. Okay, other things that we're doing. Let's see, for other questions that we have here. In general, all demos in DemoPoint, basically we have, I'll use all the hands to go into FAQs for all the Cs. Okay, so there is a sort of request for the for Shai and Solution Center team to have FAQs for repeating questions on blueprints. I think it's an interesting idea, and I'm sure they will talk to you guys about it, and maybe they will be able to do that. Okay, so one more question on the chat. Someone asked for our names, so we can't disclose those. I'm kidding. I'm Lior. Okay, Lior C. You can just email me, and Kfir B right next to me, operating all that stuff. So you can talk to us. You can talk to Shai, whatever you prefer. One more question on the chat. So one question on the chat. Let's see how we can kind of get to that. Oh, okay. So a question on the chat. Okay, very important comment actually from one of our SEs, from Winstep. And this is something that you probably need to know. After you, like, if you try to, I usually recommend, this is why we created the blueprint in this way, we kind of finish the demo with the threat prevention tagging test. If you try to run it another time, you may have a problem because this kind of sort of infection, the notification itself is being suppressed for new machines. So basically, you may have a problem if you try to run it multiple times. It will basically not work. If you want to remediate a machine, yeah, you can basically just install policy and then run it again. But before that, you'll need to remediate the machine. And again, to remediate the machine, everything you need to do, or all you need to do, is basically go to VMware. Okay, so let's go to VMware site real quick. And here you can go to Network and Security Extensions, NSX. You go to NSX Managers. Right? Okay, let's take one of our NSX managers here. And basically when you go to manage, you can remove the specific tag. You can remove that from the machine. Okay, so you'll see here the bot found tag. Okay, and you'll see that it has been attached to the web server. And basically from here you can detach it just by editing that specific tag. Just one sec. Okay, so a bit cumbersome, but this is the way to kind of detach. And again, only in case you want to rerun the same demo multiple times. Okay, from that point it will be removed and it will be propagated to everything. Okay, another question was here about about Bitcoin mining, which is kind of a hot trend right now. How does it deal with Bitcoin mining through the browser? Not sure I understand how it's related. There are other solutions that can basically prevent that. Okay, so you have other solutions for that. In this case, we're handling machines that are deployed on VMware. Okay, guys. So thank you very much. And this is, again, unless there are any more questions, if someone has a question, now is the best time to write it down. Otherwise, we'll start to conclude. Okay, so so now we'll move to the summary. And again, Yael will provide us a brief summary of what we've seen. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so thanks Lior and Kfir for running this training. I hope it was helpful for you. In front of you, you have a mailing list for Checkpoint to contact us, and for partners, we have separate mailing list for them. So you can ask any question that you want. Yes. SK will be updated with the recorded session, and also I will send it to you by email once it's ready. Also, you have the email for Lior and Kfir if you have direct questions. And that's it. So thank you very much, and have a great day.